AEW Double or Nothing is almost here, and the card is not only stacked, but we could be seeing a surprise or two along the way. And today I'll be running through my predictions for the show. Keep in mind this is being recorded on the Friday morning, so Friday Night Dynamite hasn't happened yet, but I don't think my mind would have changed too much by the end of it anyway. And before we get into it, make sure you let me know your predictions in the comments down below, and while you're down there, drop a like on the video as it helps me out a lot. But let's get in to my predictions. First up, let's start with the buy-in show and the NWA Women's World Championship match. Of course, we've got the champion SERENA DEEB taking on RIHO. With RIHO being the first ever AEW Women's Champion, she has quite a lot of stock in the company, which kind of makes me lean towards her, but ultimately the NWA Women's Championship is just that, an NWA Championship. So I don't really see a title change happening on the buy-in of a AEW pay-per-view, so I'm going to go with SERENA DEEB in this one. And onto the main card then, as at this moment there has been no other buy-in matches announced, and we're going to predict the first title match of the night, the AEW World Tag Team Championships. The champions, the Young Bucks, will be defending against the newly aligned Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston, although the obvious choice here would be to go with Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston. I think it's just that too obvious. I think the Young Bucks will retain here by some sort of shenanigans, maybe involving Don Callis, and yeah, I think we should just keep piling the heat on the Young Bucks, as people seem very annoyed with them right now. And yeah, let's have them beat the former world champion Jon Moxley and his friend Eddie Kingston. Next up, we have Sting's first in-ring match since his return to wrestling. Of course, he did have the cinematic street fight, and once again he's going to be teaming with DARBY, this time against Scorpio Sky and Ethan Page. So it's going to be interesting to see how Sting gets on in an actual match, as he hasn't been in the ring since 2016 at Night of Champions, of course in the WWE Championship match against Seth Rollins, where he injured his neck. So it's good to see the Icon back in the ring, and hopefully 100%, and I think that makes it pretty obvious who's going to come away with the win, and that will be Sting, probably via a Scorpion Death Drop. I think Darby's alignment with Sting is going to take him to the next level, and I think a big victory in front of a full crowd could be one step closer to the top of the card for Darby Allin. And honestly, I wouldn't be opposed to a Young Bucks versus Sting and Darby match somewhere down the line for the tag titles if they were to retain. And next up we have the Stadium Stampede match, which will see MJF's Pinnacle taking on the Inner Circle, and I think this is quite a tough one to call. Of course, there is the stipulation that if the Inner Circle lose, they will have to break up, which I think generally that makes people think that they're gonna win. Of course, we've also seen this match before recently with the Pinnacle winning the Blood and Guts match. I kind of think that they're gonna break up the Inner Circle. It will put a ton of heat on the Pinnacle. I think breaking the group up whilst they're seemingly at their peak isn't necessarily a bad thing, and would be the perfect launching pad for the singles career of Sammy Guevara. I think Hager could do some good things, and of course Jericho being the legend that he is, I think there's always a place for him on the card. And Santana and Ortiz could potentially go on to be the Young Bucks' next challengers. So with that said, I'm going to make a bold prediction and say that the Pinnacle are coming away with the victory. Next up, we have the AEW TNT Championship on the line, with MIRO defending against Lance Archer. Now, this is MIRO's first big defense of his title. He's had a couple of defenses sprinkled around, but this is the first pay-per-view defense at least, and probably the biggest name of all the challengers so far. Lance Archer, of course, has a history with the TNT Championship, being in the first ever official match for the belt against Cody and losing there. However, I do think MIRO is too early in his run to drop the belt, and I think Lance Archer is a good stepping stone for MIRO, and I really think this would help elevate MIRO to the next level were he to pick up the win against Archer. It would show him as the destroyer that I think he should be presented as. I could maybe see it ending in some kind of time limit draw, or maybe with both men being unable to continue due to the brutality of the match, but I'm going to go with MIRO for the victory. Next up is Hangman Page taking on Brian Cage, and yeah, not too much to say about this one. I think Adam Page is back on his way up the card, and I think with the numbers game being in Brian Cage's advantage at first, with Team Taz being by his side, I think that will lead to the Dark Order coming out to even the odds for Adam Page to pick up the win. I think it's a safe bet to say that Adam Page will be the man to dethrone Kenny Omega, and I think Brian Cage is a perfect obstacle in his way to overcome and ultimately eventually get that title shot. I think it's a little bit too soon right now, maybe at All Out or maybe even a little bit further along, but ultimately he will get there, and to get there he needs to be picking up some wins, and a big win for him would be against Brian Cage, so that's what we're going to go with today. And next up, we'll go with the Casino Battle Royale for the #1 contendership at the AEW World Championship. And this is a tough one considering there is a Joker card and we don't know exactly who that is at the minute. Going by the names that have already been announced, I think some obvious favourites would potentially be Jungle Boy, maybe Penta, but I think the overall favourite, whilst we don't know the final entrant, has to be Christian Cage. So yeah, Christian Cage has debuted with a lot of hype and it really, in my opinion, hasn't paid off so far, and I think this would be the perfect way to sort of elevate him right to the top of the card and be Kenny Omega's next challenger. He's a babyface, Kenny's a heel, it kind of works perfectly. But for the wild card, there's a few options. I've made a video on it if you haven't seen it already. Of course, with Daniel Bryan, or Bryan Danielson, now being a free agent, he would be the top pick of every AEW fan, but I just feel like it's a little bit too unrealistic. But I think maybe the top three would be Paul White, Andrade, and maybe even Nick Gage. If it was Nick Gage, he's not going to win. If it was Andrade, I think he would win, given that Omega and Andrade have a match in August for the AAA Mega Championship. So as I said in that previous video, they could have one match for the AEW World Championship, which Andrade loses, and then when they're in Mexico, he picks up the AAA Mega title. So I think that could be a way that they do it. And with Big Show, he's of course on commentary, and it would take simply him just stepping out of the chair and being the surprise that way. So yeah, they're the three I think it's most likely to be, but if I had to pick, I'd say Andrade. And if it is Andrade, I think he's going to win it. So I think that has to change my prediction from Christian Cage to Andrade. It's a big call, it might not happen. As I say, it probably will be Christian, but I'm going to put my neck out there and say Andrade is winning the Casino Battle Royale. And next up we have Cody Rhodes taking on Anthony Ogogo, of course the British boxer. Yeah, I'm not really into this match at the minute. I don't think the build has been too great. Some people feel differently, but I'm personally not into the whole nationalist thing. It's just not something that I'm that bothered about. Even being a Brit, I'm not that invested in Ogogo. I would probably rather see Cody Rhodes win, but I do think this will be a win for Ogogo, maybe even a quick squash, similar to what they did with Brody Lee when he won the TNT title, and it sort of gave Cody a bit of time to step away to do that TV show. And now that Brandy is pregnant, I think this might be the time to give him a little bit of a break to be at home. So I think Anthony Ogogo is going to come away with the victory, and I'm going to call it as a squash match. And then we have the AEW Women's World Championship, and I think this is probably the most obvious match on the card. We've got Hikaru Shida defending against Dr. Britt Baker, D.M.D. Hikaru Shida has had the title for a long time now, and I think her reign has been a little underwhelming. I do like Shida, I think she's a great talent, but I don't think the booking has necessarily really put her up there as a top women's talent in the company. I think Britt Baker so far in the booking of AEW has been elevated higher than Shida, which is why I think she takes the title. I think the time is now. The reign of Shida, although she's great, is becoming a little bit stale, and I think it's time for the women's division to head in a different direction, at least for now, with Britt Baker likely being the most popular wrestler in the company in the women's division. I think she'll be a great champion. It's really good to see how she's grown from the initial go away heat that she was receiving at the start when the crowds were there, and I think people have really got behind her now, and I think this is the perfect time to pull the trigger in front of a full packed out Daily's Place crowd. And before we get into our final pick, make sure you drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any upcoming AEW content as we head towards the Double or Nothing pay-per-view. And while you're down there, why not help support the channel by using our Fight affiliate link in the description below, where you can purchase the pay-per-view for under $20 if you're an international viewer. But with that said, let's get back to the video. And finally, we go to the AEW World Championship match with the cleaner Kenny Omega defending against Orange Cassidy and PAC. And so far, this has only really been a Kenny Omega Orange Cassidy feud, with PAC of course just being in the occasional pre-tape, but hopefully we do see PAC tonight on Dynamite. I said before that the Women's Championship match was the easiest to predict, but I think this is the second easiest, with Kenny Omega retaining. I can't see him losing the belt just yet. I don't think Cassidy's quite at World Championship level, at least not yet, although I am a fan of him. And if this was a real competition and not wrestling, I'd be rooting for PAC, but I just can't see them doing it. Omega is currently the belt collector, and it would kind of kill that gimmick if he were to lose the AEW World title. As I said earlier, I think All Out could be the time for him to drop the belt to Hangman, which would be around the time that he loses the Mega Championship to Andrade, at least in my world of predictions. So yeah, for now though, in this match, I think Omega goes away with the belt. So there's my predictions. Let me know if you agree with me in the comments down below, and while you're here, why not check out 10 candidates that could be the mystery wrestler in the Casino Battle Royale.